Hey everybody, welcome back to the Saw Shop. Just puttering in the shop today. It's pouring rain outside again, and I did a little bit of outdoor work this morning, but I'm starting to get soaked, so I came in here to do some chainsaw work. Hope everybody's having an awesome weekend. Fall is setting in here, which means it won't be long before we get snow that stays. We actually had a little bit of snow last night, so I'm 98% ready, and I feel pretty good about the winter season coming up. Anyhow, today's video comes from an email. You guys know my email's on my About page. I jump in there as often as I can. Been in there a lot lately, friends. As the seasons change, I have a little bit more time indoors, and therefore I have more time to go through emails. So if you send me an email, and if I think it's a good question, sometimes I'll make a whole video out of it. Well, today's email is from Doug Christie. Doug has a 181 281 SE. You guys can see I have one here. This one was actually donated to the channel many years ago. I should pull it out again. It's a really, really nice saw. As a lot of you may know, the 181 came before the 281 or on 288. Now, in today's world, this thing is an absolute relic. This one is a 1985. You can't get a top end for this thing anymore, friends. You get 288 or nothing. Well, funny story. I think if you run both saws back to back, it's hard to tell. I originally got exposed to these saws. A buddy of mine ran a 281, and it looked like an absolute turd, but it cut, friends, and he used to buck oak with that thing with like a 24-inch bar on it, and I thought, wow, that's a nice saw. So I've always kind of had a soft spot for these, but you can't get cylinders for them anymore, friends, and if you want to keep your 281 a 281 or 181 a 181, well, you're kind of stuck. Unless you could find a used cylinder on eBay, you're kind of stuck with what you got. So anyways, Doug Christie sent me an email, and he said, I got this, 181, 281. The piston looks okay. The cylinder's pretty mint, but I have a chip over the exhaust port. So I'm going to put the pictures of what he's stuck with right here, and then let's do a video talking about, can you save a chip cylinder, or should you even try? Check out these pictures, and then we'll jump back in. So you guys see the pictures there. Piston looks great. Looks like it's pretty much brand new. But you can see, friends, just by the color, there's no machine marks, and it's a little shiny on the bottom. Often, that's signs that a piston has a lot of time on it. And that one probably does, friends. It was just taken care of and ran properly. You see the chip on the cylinder. Now, the question is, what caused that? Doug was asking, he sent me another email, as I said, you know what, Doug, I'm going to make a video on this and I'll show you my thoughts on it. You see the chips on there. That chip is on the hot side. The hot side, friends, is this side, okay? Often if you're going to score a cylinder on the exhaust side, you're going to score it on this side of the exhaust port. So if you're looking at it, the left, if you're at the back of the saw like this, the right. Okay, he was wondering, is that from just the thermal expansion, the heat on the hot side? Well, Doug, the question is, or the answer to that is, I don't know. These saws are ancient now. It could just be that piece of plating just decided to delaminate and came off. Maybe a chip went through that saw and, kind of caught the plating. Maybe the rings, because there's so much time on that saw, maybe the rings got really sharp and just hooked that plating off and took it off. We won't know how that saw got to be where it is, but we do know is it's got a chip and we need to deal with it. I'm going to bring you guys right in. And here's what I did for this one, friends. I cut a cylinder in half this way. Okay, this is the exhaust port. Okay, exhaust port is here. Transfers are on the sides. I cut the intake side of a piston or a cylinder off to show you guys this. I may do several other videos showing it this way because, well, this is just another take on my famous cutaway. If you guys haven't seen that, go to my playlist. There's a cutaway series. It shows you how a two-stroke works, explains certain aspects of it, and that way maybe if you're still struggling with these things, they're very simple but very complicated. If you're still struggling with how they actually work, maybe check that playlist out. And again, friends, always go back to my playlist if you're looking for a certain topic. I have playlists. I think I have 40 different playlists now, friends. Every different kind of Husky. I have general still ones. I have different still builds. Dolmar, Husqvarna, McCulloch, Homelight. So go in there, friends, if you're interested. I think I'm up to like 700 videos now. So if you're looking for a certain title or something, please go into my playlist and check it out. Okay, I'll bring you guys in. Let's have a look at this cylinder right here. This one died a horrible death. Okay, so this is a steel 026 cylinder. You guys can see the mounting studs for the top cover. Okay, this is an 026 cylinder that I cut in half this way. So this is the exhaust port. Here's your transfers. If you're ever wondering how transfers look, I didn't even blow the dust out of it, friends, because for this little teaching session, it doesn't matter how clean this thing is. All that matters is that you can see the exhaust port. But again, notice the transfers angle up a little bit, okay? So, you look at this cylinder actually peeled plating on the bottom. And this is from a long time ago. I've had this cylinder kicking around for 10 years, probably, friends. What happened was this thing died a horrible death. It was run lean with a dull chain, possibly no mix. And this whole section was covered in transfer, meaning the piston got hot and it smeared the piston all over the cylinder wall, okay? So I tried to clean it, and what ended up happening is when I started cleaning it, I soon realized when I got to underneath that there was no plating there. I couldn't even tell, friends, okay? So that's how this one died. Now, the question Doug is asking is, can he save that? Well, first thing, Doug, I want you to take a screwdriver, okay? I want you to go where that chip is, and I want you to try. I know it sounds horrible. Get something sharp, even a pick, okay? I want you to reef on that. Just scrape it a little bit and see if that plating comes off, okay? Before you go any further. Because if that plating wants to come off, there's no point on trying to save the cylinder, unfortunately. Now, we're assuming that the plating is stuck real good to the cylinder, okay? If it's not, throw it in the garbage, unfortunately. But I think Doug thinks that it's gonna live. Okay, friends. Now, first things first. Location of the chip is everything, okay? Before we even talk about grinding it away, I'm just going to take my marker. Let's say we have a chip right there, friends, okay? A chip in the center is what I want to see because that's easier to get rid of, okay? Because of how these are shaped. You notice this is not flat, okay? This is not flat at all. It's tapered, right? Notice that? Now, the reason why this is tapered is because when the ring's going up and down, you want it to ease in and out. The ring or rings slightly go into the exhaust port, okay? So that's the first thing you got to look at is where is the chip? Now, Doug's chip is right here, okay? Doug's chip is right there. Kind of like that, right? From what I saw in the pictures. the pictures were shot this way. Now that's probably, Doug, the worst place to have a chip because it's on the side, okay? Now, what you want to do is you want to figure out what percentage of the bore the exhaust port is. And you want to see, take your old piston, put it in there straight, okay? Put it in there straight. Take an awl or something to scratch it with and see how close the piston is to the transfers or the windows, okay? Let's get a piston and have a look at that. Now, I'm pretty sure this is an old 281 piston. Might not be, but 98% sure it is. What you want to know is, and I'm just going to draw on this because that'll probably help you guys. What you want to know is how much overlap you have, okay? So you're going to go into the exhaust port and you're going to scratch the corners on your old piston, okay? And you're going to come out and you're going to measure this. You don't want it too thin. I kind of like it, 100 thousandths or more, maybe a little less. You don't want it too close because you could get a leak, okay, from your bottom end. When the piston's going down, it could leak into there and vice versa. The exhaust port pressure, when this thing fires, could push gas back here and it'll end up in your bottom end, which you don't want, right? So, first thing, look at that. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you have a chip here, okay, you may have to widen this a bit. I'm just going to wipe this off with my finger. Okay, you may have to widen this a bit. Just a bit on both sides. So that your chip is farther away from the edge. And why? Because you're going to have to reprofile your exhaust port with a Dremel, with a grinder. Okay, like that. Now, if your exhaust port is the stock width and your chip is here, you might not be able to grind it out high enough. And basically what I'm saying here, Doug, is you're going to have to, you need to grind that chip out, okay? So if your chip's here, like that, okay, if your chip's like that, you're going to have to grind it away and get that chip out of there and make it match fairly nicely. Now, some guys like a flatter exhaust port. I don't recommend that for beginners. I don't know if Doug's ported or what the deal is. You want to keep that exhaust port a little bit rounded because guess what? If you make it flat like this and you widen it, that ring will catch and that cylinder will be gone. You will literally break the top of the exhaust port off, okay? So you want to grind it. You want to grind away that chip. Okay, and maybe widen it just a little bit. Try not to get it too thin there, but if you got to widen it a bit to get more of a taper on your exhaust roof, then that's what you're going to do. And really, Doug, if you're worried about if you're worried about the shape, get your scratch awl and scratch the whole exhaust port, and then measure the sides. Use that as a template as you're grinding. Slide the top end back on, of course, blow it out, get all the chips out, slide it back on and compare what you've done with the factory slope or this factory shape to the top of the exhaust port and see if you're kind of there. Then when you're done, you're going to go in with a rounded, I use a diamond burr, those little round ones. I go in and I hit it and I grind this right here. I grind this little bevel back in. Now remember, if you're almost at the top of the chip, a hair, use that final little bit as your bevel, and that's where you grind your chamfer in, and that helps the exhaust port get in and out of, or helps the ring get in and out of the exhaust port. Okay, Doug? So, yes, you can grind a chip away. I understand. Sometimes it's money. You don't have the money to replace your saw. Remember, friends, when I started working on saws, it's because I didn't have any money. I couldn't afford. I had one or two saws, And I'm like, I need a bigger saw because I need to up my production. I'm going to buy a bigger saw. I started looking at the price of bigger saws, and they're $600, $700, $800. And I'm thinking, geez, back then a cord of wood was only $200 split. And I'm thinking, well, this is ridiculous. You know, I'm going to have to burn and cut a lot of wood with that saw before I pay it off even or break even. So I was buying blown up saws for $50 and trying to keep the budget as low as possible to get them going. Now, so the cylinder's good. You can grind it. Now here's the problem, Doug, with grinding the exhaust port higher. If you grind the exhaust port higher, you change the timing of the saw. That saw is essentially going to be ported, Doug, and your exhaust is going to be higher, which means you're going to have a faster saw with less compression, generally. Okay, so if you don't have a timing wheel, this is going to be more difficult. If you could time the saw, time it, figure out where it opens stock, put a ring in there, Doug. Push the ring up till the bottom of the ring is to the top of the chip and figure out what your new exhaust timing would be. That would give you a better idea. Don't want to go much over 100, 98, somewhere around there. I think stock, this is going to be like 102, 104. So you may have 4-6 degrees in there of chip. If you got more than that, well, just be prepared. Okay, so now you've timed it. Your exhaust port is too high. Does that mean it's over? Well, no, if you have a lathe. If you have a lathe, you could cut the base down some. Say a degree in this saw is 20 thousandths at this point in the stroke. Remember, the piston speed is not linear per degree. It moves a little more or a little less, depending on where in the stroke the piston is, okay? Based on where the wrist pin is, the rod length, the stroke, all that matters, and it will change your how many degrees it moves. I always have people saying, well, you should just measure how many degrees, and you know on the intake and exhaust and the transfers, you'll know exactly how many degrees to grind because you can measure it. Well, that could be a good reference point, but remember, your degrees change how much the stroke moves and how many degrees this will open depends on where it's at in the stroke, okay? So just remember that. At 90 degrees, if the wrist pin is here at 90 degrees, you will get more movement than you will, let's say, up here or down there, because leverage, right, friends? The farther out it is on the fulcrum, the more movement you're going to get, right? So Doug, can you do it? Yes. Should you? Well, of course you should. If you want to try and save that cylinder, do it. What are you out? The cylinder's already garbage. All I would say is, if you don't want to have an orangutan saw and you figure your exhaust port's going to open way too soon, you could machine this down. I don't know if you have access to a lathe, Doug. Maybe you have a buddy that does, but you could lower this cylinder 2 degrees, say, maybe 40 thousandths, get rid of your base gasket. Now, Doug mentioned that the saw he has like 50 degrees squish with a base gasket. So rip that base gasket out of there, Doug. You'll probably have 30 thousandths of squish. I think I said degrees before, but it's actually thousandths. Okay. I wouldn't run a 281 under 25 degrees of squish. So remember, you're going to have to keep that squish in check. If you do drop the cylinder, you're also going to have to machine the crown of the piston accordingly. There's enough meat on these. You could take a little off the top or cut yourself a pop-up and only machine the edge here. Okay, so, and the other thing you want to look out for, Doug, if you do machine your cylinder, here's the intake side, friends. There's the transfers. One thing you want to remember, though, if you do machine it, your intake is getting lower, and your intake opens on the upstroke and closes on the downstroke. So again, Doug, if you lower this 40 thousandths, it is the same. If you lower the whole cylinder 40 thousandths, it is the same as lowering your intake port 40 thousandths. Okay, or whatever it is. So, intakes, saw like this, don't want to run it more than 156, 158. Stock, I think these are at like high 140s, so you can, I mean, you could lower the cylinder probably 5 degrees, which is 10 degrees of duration, and you won't have any issues. You'll just have a saw that gets more fuel. But there you go. I hope that helps, Doug. I didn't want to type all that because I thought, it probably is just better to make a video on it. Yes, you can fix your cylinder. Yes, you can grind a chip out. But again, if you grind the chip out higher, you're changing the exhaust timing. You are also changing how much compression you may or may not make. And if the exhaust timing is higher, you may want to lower your intake timing a few degrees. Okay, you may want to grind your intake down or grind your piston skirt. There's one that's been ported. I'm just kidding, friends. When your piston gets thin and worn, it can catch the intake, and once your piston starts to rock as it gets worn, it'll catch the intake and eventually break the skirt. That's what happens to a lot of saws. So, okay, there we go. I hope that helps, Doug, and happy grinding. Well, there you guys go. I hope that helped a bunch of you. I get it. Sometimes you don't have the budget, or you can't get a cylinder. You can't get a cylinder for a 281. I wish you could, but the market's just not there, friends. I often hear people say, well, why doesn't Highway make a cylinder for XYZ saw? Well, friends, because there's none of those left. Like, there may be a few hundred or a few thousand left in the world, and of those few thousand, how many need a cylinder? And of those that need a cylinder, how many people are going to spend money to buy one? That's how I look at it. So, we're lucky that we have the amount of aftermarket parts that we do have for the saws that are out there, because like I said, to spend thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars to tool up to make pistons and cylinders, you have to sell a lot of cylinders before you're even breaking even. So thank you to those aftermarket companies that make parts for these oddball saws and actually invest the time and energy to make quality stuff for some of these saws that are out there. Anyhow, Doug, you got my email. Try and grind it. If you have any more questions, buddy, hit me up. I'd love to help you out. Thanks for watching. Take her easy. Later.